welcome back to Distracted DM. We're continuing with another one of our terrifying tales of terror. Now, hey, yes, hello, welcome back. I'm Austin, also known as Distracted DM. And yeah, so I am going to be continuing the short-ish story of the Slithering Shadow, also known as Zuthal of Dusk, which is a Conan the Barbarian story written by Robert E. Howard. Okay. Or, there we go. Alright. So, we will be continuing. So where last we left our heroic barbarian, Conan and his companion, let's see here. One moment. What was her name? Blah blah blah. Come on. Okay. Let's see. Conan. Conan. What is best in life? Natala. There we go. So Conan and Natala had escaped from. They were in an army. They were in a mercenary army that had gone too far into enemy territory and been destroyed, and they were lost in the desert. Yeah. So, and they were dying of thirst, and they found this weird city. And they found. Let's see. They entered the gate, and there was a dude that was lying dead on the ground, and Conan checked him, and he was dead. And then they went to the well in the square, past the dead dude, and the dude got up and attacked Conan, and Conan killed him and dumped his body in the well because they couldn't get to the water because it was too deep and there was no bucket. So if they couldn't have the water, then nobody can, because that is how Conan rolls when he is pissed off, or just maybe in general. So we are continuing, and there's been a little bit of creepiness so far. Let's see. There was a reason for shrieking. And as we can imagine, there may or may not be a slithering shadow. So let's see here. They have eaten, and they've had some food and wine, I believe. So they are going to continue exploring, even though the girl wants to leave. But Conan, wants to keep on adventuring because he is an adventurous sort. So we will continue. From where they now stood, they could no longer see the dais, but they could see the shadow it cast on the wall behind it. And now another shadow moved across the wall, a huge, shapeless black blot. Conan felt his hair prickle curiously as he watched. Distorted though it might be, he felt that he had never seen a man or beast which cast such a shadow. He was consumed with curiosity, but some instinct held him frozen in his tracks. He heard Natala's quick, panting gasps as she stared with dilated eyes. No other sound disturbed the tense stillness. The great shadow engulfed that of the dais. For a long instant, only its black bulk was thrown on the smooth wall. Then slowly it receded, and once more the dais was etched darkly against the wall. But the sleeper was no longer upon it. Oh yeah, so they found just like a sleeping dude, because like the city's nobody's there. So all right, and now there's no more sleeping dude because the shadow, I guess, ate them. An hysterical gurgle rose in Natala's throat, and Conan gave her an admonitory shake. He was aware of an iciness in his own veins. Human foes he did not fear. Anything understandable, however grisly, caused no tremors in his broad breast. But this was beyond his ken. After a while, however, his curiosity conquered his uneasiness, and he moved out, into the unlighted chamber again, ready for anything. Looking into the other room, he saw it was empty. The dais stood as he had first seen it, except that no bejeweled human lay thereon. Only on its silken covering shone a single drop of blood, like a great crimson gem. Natala saw it and gave a low, choking cry, for which Conan did not punish her. Again he felt the icy hand of fear. On that dais a man had lain. Something had crept into the chamber and carried him away. What that something was, Conan had no idea, but an aura of unnatural horror hung over those dim-lit chambers. He was ready to depart. Taking Natala's hand, he turned back, then hesitated. Somewhere back among the chambers they had traversed, he heard the sound of a footfall. A human foot. bear or softly shod, had made that sound, and Conan, with the wariness of a wolf, turned quickly aside. He believed he could come again into the outer court, and yet avoid the room from which the sound had appeared to come. But they had not crossed the first chamber on their new route, when the rustle of a silken hanging brought them about suddenly. Before a curtained alcove stood a man, eyeing them intently. He was exactly like the others they had encountered, tall, well-made, clad in purple garments, and with a jeweled girdle. There was neither surprise nor hostility in his amber eyes. They were dreamy as a lotus-eater's. He did not draw the short sword at his side. After a tense moment he spoke, in a far-away, detached tone, and a language his hearers did not understand. On a venture, Conan replied in Stygian, and the stranger answered in the same tongue. Who are you? I am Conan, a Cimmerian, answered the barbarian. This is Natala, of Brythunia. What city is this? The man did not at once reply. His dreamy, sensuous gaze rested on Natala, and he drawled, Of all my rich visions, this is the strangest. O girl of the golden locks, from what far dreamland do you come? From Andara, or Tothra, or Kuth of the star girdle? What madness is this? Growled the Cimmerian harshly, not relishing the man's words or manner. The other did not heed him. I have dreamed more gorgeous beauties, he murmured, lithe women with hair dusky as night, and dark eyes of unfathomed mystery. But your skin is white as milk, your eyes are clear as dawn, and there is about you a freshness and daintiness alluring as honey. Come to my couch, little dream girl. He advanced and reached for her, and Conan struck aside his hand with a force that might have broken his arm. The man reeled back, clutching the numbed member, his eyes clouding. What rebellion of ghosts is this? He muttered. Barbarian, I command ye, begone, fade, dissipate, fade, vanish. I'll vanish your head from your shoulders, snarled the infuriated Cimmerian, his saber gleaming in his hand. Is this the welcome you give strangers? By Crom, I'll drench these hangings in blood. The dreaminess had faded from the other's eyes, to be replaced by a look of bewilderment. Thug, he ejaculated, you are real. Whence come you? Who are you? What do you in Zutal? We came from the desert, Conan growled. We wandered into the city at dusk, famishing. We found a feast set for someone, and we ate it. I have no money to pay for it. In my country, no starving man is denied food, but you civilized people must have your recompense, if you are all like I ever met. We have done no harm, and we were just leaving. By Crom, I do not like this place, where dead men rise and sleeping men vanish into the bellies of shadows. The man started violently at the last comment, his yellow face turning ashy. What do you say? Shadows? Into the belly of shadows? Well, answered the Cimmerian cautiously, whatever it was that takes a man from a sleeping dais and leaves only a spot of blood. You have seen? You have seen? The man was shaking like a leaf. His voice cracked on the high-pitched note. Only a man sleeping on a dais, and a shadow that engulfed him, answered Conan. The effect of his words on the other was horrifying. With an awful scream, the man turned and rushed from the chamber. In his blind haste, he caromed from the side of the door, righted himself, and fled through the adjoining chambers, still screaming at the top of his voice. Amazed, Conan stared after him, the girl trembling as she clutched the giant's arm. They could no longer see the flying figure, but they still heard his frightful screams, dwindling in the distance and echoing from the vaulted roofs. Suddenly, one cry, louder than the others, rose and broke short, followed by blank silence. Pardon me? Crom! Conan wiped the perspiration from his forehead with a hand that was not entirely steady. Surely this is a city of the mad! Let's get out of here, before we meet other madmen. It is all a nightmare, whispered Natala. We are dead and damned. We died out in the desert and are in hell. We are disembodied spirits. Ow! Her yelp was induced by a resounding spank from Conan's open hand. Thank you, Conan. Thank you for that. You're no spirit when a pat makes you yell like that, he commented, with the grim humor which frequently manifested itself at inopportune times. We are alive, though we may not be if we loiter in this devil-haunted pile. Come. They had traversed but a single chamber when again they stopped short. Someone or something was approaching. They faced the doorway whence the sound came, waiting for they knew not what. Conan's nostrils widened and his eyes narrowed. He caught the faint scent of the perfume he had noticed earlier in the night. A figure framed itself in the doorway. Conan swore under his breath. Natala's red lips opened wide. It was a woman who stood there staring at them in wonder. She was tall, lithe, shaped like a goddess, clad in a narrow girdle crusted with jewels. A burnished mass of night-black hair set off the whiteness of her ivory body. Her dark eyes, shaded by long, dusky eyelashes, were deep with sensuous mystery. Conan caught his breath at her beauty, and Natala stared with dilated eyes. The Cimmerian had never seen such a woman. Her face outline was Stygian, but she was not dusky-skinned like the Stygian woman he had known. Her limbs were like alabaster. But when she spoke, in a deep, rich, musical voice, it was in the Stygian tongue. "Who are you? What do you in Zuthal? Who is that girl?" "Who are you?" bluntly countered Conan, who quickly wearied of answering questions. "I am Thalis, the Stygian," she replied. "Are you mad to come here?" "I've been thinking I must be," he growled. "By Crom, if I am sane, I'm out of place here, because these people are all maniacs. We stagger in from the desert, dying of thirst and hunger, and we come upon a dead man who tries to stab me in the back. We enter a palace, rich and luxuriant, yet apparently empty. We find a meal set, but with no feasters. Then we see a shadow devour a sleeping man." He watched her narrowly, and saw her color change slightly. "Well?" "Well, what?" she demanded, apparently regaining control of herself. "I was just waiting for you to run through the rooms howling like a wild woman," he answered. "The man I told about the shadow did." She shrugged her slim ivory shoulders. "That was the screams I heard then. Well, to every man his fate, and it's foolish to squeal like a rat in a trap. When Thog wants me, he will come for me." "Who is Thog?" demanded Conan suspiciously. She gave him a long, appraising stare that brought color to Natala's face and made her bite her small red lip. "Sit down on that divan and I will tell you," she said. "But first, tell me your names." "I am Conan, a Cimmerian, and this is Natala, a daughter of Brythunia," he answered. "We are refugees of an army destroyed on the borders of Kush, but I am not desirous of sitting down where black shadows might steal upon my back." With a light musical laugh, she seated herself, stretching out her supple limbs with studied abandon. "Be at ease," she advised. "If Thog wishes you, he will take you, wherever you are. That man you mentioned, who screamed and ran, did you not hear him give one great cry, and then fall silent? In his frenzy, he must have run full into that which he sought to escape. No man can avoid his fate." Conan grunted noncommittally, but he sat down on the edge of the couch, his saber across his knees, his eyes wandering suspiciously about the chamber. Natala nestled against him, clutching him jealously, her legs tucked up under her. She eyed the stranger woman with suspicion and resentment. She felt small and dust-stained and insignificant before this glamorous beauty, and she could not mistake the look in the eyes which feasted on every detail of the bronzed giant's physique. "What is this place? And who are these people?" demanded Conan. "This city is called Zuthal. It is very ancient. It is built over an oasis, which the founders of Zuthal found in their wanderings. They came from the east, so long ago that not even their descendants remember the age." "Surely there are not many of them. These palaces seem empty." "No, and yet more than you might think. This city is really one great palace, with every building inside the walls closely connected with the others. You might walk among these chambers for hours and see no one. At other times you would meet hundreds of the inhabitants." "How is that?" Conan inquired uneasily. This savored too strongly of sorcery for comfort. "Much of the time these people lie in sleep. Their dream life is as important, and to them as real, as their waking life. You have heard of the Black Lotus? In certain pits of the city it grows. Through the ages they have cultivated it until, instead of death, its juice induces dreams, gorgeous and fantastic. In these dreams they spend most of their time. Their lives are vague, erratic, and without plan. They dream, they wake, drink, love, eat, and dream again. They seldom finish anything they begin, but leave it half completed and sink back again into the slumber of the black lotus. That meal you found, doubtless one awoke, felt the urge of hunger, prepared the meal for himself, then forgot about it and wandered away to dream again. Where do they get their food? Interrupted Conan. I saw no fields or vineyards outside the city. Have they orchards and cattle pens within the walls? She shook her head. They manufacture their own food out of the primal elements. They are wonderful scientists when they are not drugged with their dream flower. Their ancestors were mental giants who built this marvelous city in the desert, and though the race became slaves to their curious passions, some of their wonderful knowledge still remains. Have you wondered about these lights? They are jewels fused with radium. You rub them with your thumb to make them glow, and rub them again the opposite way to extinguish them. That is but a single example of their science. But much they have forgotten. They take little interest in waking life, choosing to lie most of the time in death-like sleep. Then the dead man at the gate, began Conan, was doubtless slumbering. Sleepers of the lotus are like the dead. Animation is apparently suspended. It is impossible to detect the slightest sign of life. The spirit has left the body and is roaming at will through other exotic worlds. The man at the gate was a good example of the irresponsibility of these people's lives. He was guarding the gate where custom decrees a watch be kept, though no enemy has ever advanced across the desert. In other parts of the city you would find other guards, generally sleeping as soundly as the man at the gate. Conan mulled over this for a space. Where are the people now? Scattered in different parts of the city, lying on couches, on silken divans, in cushion-littled alcoves, on fur-covered daisies, all wrapped in the shining veil of dreams. Conan felt the skin twitch between his massive shoulders. It was not soothing to think of hundreds of people lying cold and still throughout the tapestried palaces, their glassy eyes turned up unseemingly, their glassy eyes turning unseeingly upward. He remembered something else. What of the thing that stole through the chambers and carried away the man on the dais? A shudder twitched her ivory limbs. That was Thog, the ancient, the god of Zuthal, who dwells in the sunken dome in the center of the city. He has always dwelt in Zuthal. Whether he came here with the ancient founders, or was here when they built the city, none knows. But the people of Zuthal worship him. Mostly he sleeps below the city, but sometimes, at irregular intervals, he grows hungry, and then he steals through the secret corridors and the dim-lit chambers, seeking prey. Then none is safe. Natala moaned with terror and clasped Conan's mighty neck as if to resist an effort to drag her from her protector's side. Crom, he ejaculated aghast. You mean to tell me these people lie down calmly and sleep, with this demon crawling among them? It is only occasionally that he is hungry, she repeated. A god must have his sacrifices. When I was a child in Stygia, the people lived under the shadow of the priests. None ever knew when he or she would be seized and dragged to the altar. What difference whether the priests give a victim to the gods or the god comes for his own victim? Such is not the custom of my people, Conan growled. Nor of Natala's either. The Hyborians do not sacrifice humans to their god, Mitra, and as for my people, by Crom, I'd like to see a priest try to drag a Cimmerian to the altar. There'd be blood spilt, but not as the priest intended. You are a barbarian, laughed Thalis, but with a glow in her luminous eyes. Fog is very ancient and very terrible. These folks must be fools or heroes, grunted Conan, to lie down and dream their idiotic dreams, knowing they might awaken in his belly. She laughed. They know nothing else. For untold generations Thog has preyed on them. He has been one of the factors which have reduced their numbers from thousands to hundreds. A few more generations and they will be extinct, and Thog must either fare forth into the world for new prey, or retire to the underworld whence he came so long ago. They realize their ultimate doom, but they are fatalists. Oh, wait a minute. This might still be her. Yep, I think this is still her. Yep. They realize their ultimate doom, but they are fatalists, incapable of resistance or escape. Not one of the present generation has been out of sight of these walls. There is an oasis a day's march to the south. I have seen it on the old maps their ancestors drew on parchment, but no man of Zuthal has visited it for 3 generations, much less made any attempt to explore the fertile grasslands which the maps show lying another day's march beyond it. They are a fast fading race, drowned in lotus dreams, stimulating their waking hours by means of the golden wine which heals wounds, prolongs life, and invigorates the most sated debauchee. Yet they cling to life and fear the deity they worship. You saw how one went mad at knowledge that Thog was roving the palaces. I have seen the whole city screaming and tearing its hair and running frenziedly out of the gates, to cower outside the walls and draw lots, to see which would be bound and flung back through the arched doors, to satisfy Thog's lust and hunger. Were they not all slumbering now, the word of his coming would send them all raving and shrieking again through the outer gates. "Oh, Conan!" begged Natala hysterically. "Let us flee!" "In good time," muttered Conan, his eyes burning on Thalus's ivory limbs. "What are you, a Stygian woman, doing here?" "I came here when a young girl," she answered, leaning lithely back against the velvet divan and intertwining her slender fingers behind her dusky head. "I am the daughter of a king, no common woman, as you can see by my skin, which is as white as that of your little blonde there. I was abducted by a rebel prince who, with an army of Cushite bowmen, pushed southward into the wilderness, searching for a land he could make his own. He and all his warriors perished in the desert, but one, before he died, placed me on a camel and walked beside it until he dropped and died in his tracks. The beast wandered on, and I finally passed into delirium from thirst and hunger, and awakened in this city. They told me I had been seen from the walls, early in the dawn, lying senseless beside a dead camel. They went forth and brought me in, and revived me with their wonderful golden wine, and only the sight of a woman would have led them to venture far from their walls. They were naturally much interested in me, especially the men. As I could not speak their language, they learned to speak mine. They are very quick and able of intellect. They learned my language long before I had learned theirs. But they were more interested in me than in my language. I have been, and am, the only thing for which a man of them will forego his lotus dreams for a space." She laughed wickedly, flashing her audacious eyes meaningly at Conan. "Of course the women are jealous of me," she continued tranquilly. "They are handsome enough in their yellow-skinned ways, but they are dreamy and uncertain as the men, and these latter like me not only for my beauty, but for my reality. I am no dream, though I have dreamed the dreams of the lotus. I am a normal woman, with earthly emotions and desires. With such these moon-eyed yellow women cannot compare. That is why it would be better for you to cut that girl's throat with your saber, before the men of Zuthal waken and catch her. They will put her through paces she never dreamed of. She is too soft to endure what I have thrived on. I am a daughter of luxure, and before I have known 15 summers, I had been led through the temples of Derketo, the dusky goddess, and had been initiated into the mysteries. Not that my first years in Zuthal were years of unmodified pleasure. The people of Zuthal have forgotten more than the priestesses of Derketo ever dreamed. They live only for sensual joys. Dreaming or waking, their lives are filled with exotic ecstasies beyond the ken of ordinary men." "Damned degenerates!" growled Conan. "It is all in the point of view," smiled Thalus lazily. "Well," he decided, "we're merely wasting time. I can see this is no place for ordinary mortals. We'll be gone before your morons awake, or Thog comes to devour us. I think the desert would be kinder." Natala, whose blood had curdled in her veins at Thalus's words, fervently agreed. She could speak Stygian only brokenly, but she understood it well enough. Conan stood up, drawing her up beside him. "If you'll show us the nearest way out of this city," he grunted, "we'll take ourselves off." But his gaze lingered on the Stygian's sleek limbs and ivory breasts. She did not miss his look, and she smiled enigmatically as she rose with the lithe ease of a great lazy cat. Follow me, she directed, and led the way, conscious of Conan's eyes fixed on her supple figure and perfectly poised carriage. She did not go the way they had come, but before Conan's suspicions could be aroused, she halted in a wide, ivory-chased chamber and pointed to a tiny fountain which gurgled in the center of the ivory floor. "Don't you want to wash your face, child?" she asked Natala. "It is stained with dust, and there is dust in your hair." Natala colored resentfully at the suggestion of malice in the Stygian's faintly mocking tone, but she complied, wondering miserably just how much havoc the desert sun and wind had wrought on her complexion, a feature for which women of her race were justly noted. She knelt beside the fountain, shook back her hair, slipped her tunic down to her waist, and began to laver not only her face, but her white arms and shoulders as well. "By Crom," grumbled Conan, "a woman will stop to consider her beauty if the devil himself were on her heels. Haste, girl, you'll be dusty again before we've got out of sight of the city, and Thalis, I'd take it kindly if you'd furnish us with a bit of food and drink." For answer, Thalis leaned herself against him, slipping one white arm about his bronzed shoulders. Her sleek, naked flank pressed against his thigh, and the perfume of her foamy hair was in his nostrils. "Why dare the desert?" she whispered urgently. "Stay here. I will teach you the ways of Zuthal. I will protect you. I will love you. You are a real man. I am sick of these moon calves who sigh and wake and dream again. I am hungry for the hard, clean passion of a man from the earth. The blaze of your dynamic eyes makes my heart pound in my bosom, and the touch of your iron-thewed arm maddens me." Oh my god. Sorry. "Stay here. I will make you king of Zuthal. I will show you all the ancient mysteries and the exotic ways of pleasure. She had thrown both arms about his neck and was standing on tiptoe, her vibrant body shivering against his. Over her ivory shoulders, he saw Natala. Over her ivory shoulder, he saw Natala, throwing back her damp tousled hair, stopped short, her lovely eyes dilating, her red lips parting in a shocked O. With an embarrassed grunt, Conan disengaged Thalis's clinging arms and put her aside with one massive arm. She threw a swift glance at the Brythunian girl and smiled enigmatically, seeming to nod her splendid head in mysterious cogitation. Natala rose and jerked up her tunic, her eyes blazing, her lips pouting sulkily. Conan swore under his breath. He was no more monogamous in his nature than the average soldier of fortune, but there was an innate decency about him that was Natala's best protection. Thalis did not press her suit. Beckoning them with her slender hand to follow, she turned and walked across the chamber. There, close to the tapestried wall, she halted suddenly. Conan, watching her, wondered if she had heard the sounds that might be made by a nameless monster stealing through the midnight chambers, and his skin crawled at the thought. "What do you hear?" he demanded. "Watch that doorway," she replied, pointing. He wheeled, sword ready. Only the empty arch of the entrance met his gaze. Then, behind him, sounded a quick, faint scuffling noise, a half-choked gasp. He whirled. Thalis and Natala had vanished. The tapestry was settling back in place, as if it had been lifted away from the wall. As he gaped bewilderingly, from behind the tapestry wall rang a muffled scream in the voice of the Brythunian girl. And we are treated to yet another picture. I guess in this case it is Thalis threatening Natala with a whip or a cat of nine tails. Oh, all right. That's the end of part 1 of Zuthal of Dusk. Let's see, how many? Part 4. Oh, okay. Well, okay, we can keep going a little bit. How long have we been on? I've been on for half an hour. Okay, cool. Yeah, so we will continue. How long is part 2? Oh, part 2 is super quick. Okay, so I think we'll finish part 2, and then we will take a break. When Conan turned, in compliance with Thalis's request, to glare at the doorway opposite, Natala had been standing just behind him, close to the side of the Stygian. The instant the Cimmerian's back was turned, Thalis, with a pantherish quickness almost incredible, clapped her hand over Natala's mouth, stifling the cry she tried to give. Simultaneously, the Stygian's other arm was passed about the blonde girl's supple waist, and she was jerked back against the wall, which seemed to give way as Thalis's shoulder pressed against it. A section of the wall swung inward, and through a slit that opened in the tapestry, Thalis slid with her captive, just as Conan wheeled back. Inside was utter blackness as the secret door swung to again. Thalis paused to fumble at it for an instant, apparently sliding home a bolt, and as she took her hand from Natala's mouth to perform this act, the Brythunian girl began to scream at the top of her voice. Thalis's laugh was like poisoned honey in the darkness. "Scream if you will, little fool. It will only shorten your life." At that, Natala ceased suddenly, and cowered, shaking in every limb. "Why did you do this?" she begged. "What are you going to do?" "I am going to take you down this corridor for a short distance," answered Thalis, "and leave you for one who will sooner or later come for you." "Oh!" Natala's voice broke in a sob of terror. "Why should you harm me? I have never injured you." "I want your warrior. You stand in my way. He desires me. I can read the look in his eyes. But for you, he would willingly stay here and be my king. When you are out of the way, he will follow me." "He will cut your throat," answered Natala with conviction, knowing Conan better than Thalis did. "We shall see," answered the Stygian coolly from the confidence of her power over men. At any rate, you will not know whether he stabs or kisses me, because you will be the bride of him who dwells in the darkness. Come!" Half mad with terror, Natala fought like a wild thing, but it availed her nothing. With a lithe strength she would not have believed possible in a woman, Thalis picked her up and carried her down the black corridor as if she had been a child. Natala did not scream again, remembering the Stygian's sinister words. The only sounds were her desperate, quick panting, and Thalis's soft, taunting, lascivious laughter. Then the Brythunian's fluttering hands closed on something in the dark, a jeweled dagger hilt jutting from Thalis's gem-crusted girdle. Natala jerked it forth and struck blindly, and with all her girlish power. A scream burst from Thalis's lips, feline in its pain and fury. She reeled, and Natala slipped from her relaxing grasp to bruise her tender limbs on the smooth stone floor. Rising, she scurried to the nearest wall and stood there, panting and trembling, flattening herself against the stones. She could not see Thalis, but she could hear her. The Stygian was quite certainly not dead. She was cursing in a steady stream, and her fury was so concentrated and deadly that Natala felt her bones turn to wax, her blood to ice. "Where are you, you little she-devil?" gasped Thalis. "Let me get my fingers on you again, and I'll—" Natala grew physically sick as Thalis described the bodily injuries she intended to inflict on her rival. The Stygian's choice of language would have shamed the toughest courtesan in Aquilonia. Natala heard her groping in the dark, and then a light sprang up. Evidently, whatever fear Thalis felt of this black corridor was submerged in her anger. The light came from one of the radium gems which adorned the walls of Zuthal. This Thalis had rubbed, and now she stood bathed in its reddish glow, a light different from that which the others had emitted. One hand was pressed to her side, and blood trickled between the fingers. But she did not seem weakened or badly hurt, and her eyes blazed fiendishly. What little courage remained to Natala ebbed away at the sight of the Stygian standing limbed in that weird glow, her beautiful face contorted with a passion that was no less than hellish. She now advanced with a pantherish tread, drawing her hand away from her wounded side, and shaking the blood drops impatiently from her fingers. Natala saw that she had not badly harmed her rival. The blade had glanced from the jewels of Thalis's girdle, and inflicted a very superficial flesh wound, only enough to rouse the Stygian's unbridled fury. "Give me that dagger, you fool!" she gritted, striding up to the cowering girl. Natala knew that she ought to fight while she had the chance, but she simply could not summon up the courage. Never much of a fighter, the darkness, violence, and horror of her adventure had left her limp, mentally and physically. Thalis snatched the dagger from her lax fingers and threw it contemptuously aside. "You little slut!" she ground between her teeth, slapping the girl viciously with either hand. "Before I drag you down the corridor and throw you into Thog's jaws, I'll have a little of your blood myself. You would dare to knife me? Well, for that audacity you shall pay." Seizing her by her hair, Thalis dragged her down the corridor in a short distance to the edge of the circle of the light. A metal ring showed in the wall, above the level of a man's head. From it depended a silken cord. As in a nightmare, Natala felt her tunic being stripped from her, and the next instant Thalis had jerked up her wrists and bound them to the ring, where she hung naked as the day she was born, her feet barely touching the floor. Twisting her head, Natala saw Thalis unhook a jewel-handled whip from where it hung on the wall, near the ring. The lashes consisted of 7 round silk cords, harder yet more pliant than leather thongs. With a hiss of vindictive gratification, Thalis drew back her arm, and Natala shrieked as the cords curled across her loins. Oh, Jesus. The tortured girl writhed, twisted, and tore agonizingly at the thongs which imprisoned her wrists. She had forgotten the lurking menace her cries might summon, and so apparently had Thalis. Every stroke evoked screams of anguish. The whippings Natala had received in the Shemite slave markets paled to insignificance before this. She had never guessed the punishing power of hard-woven silk cords. Their caress was more exquisitely painful than any birch twigs or leather thongs. They whistled venomously as they cut the air. Then Natala twisted her tear-stained face over her shoulder to shriek for mercy. Something froze her cries. Agony gave place to paralyzing horror in her beautiful eyes. Struck by her expression, Thalis checked her lifted hand and whirled, quick as a cat. Too late! An awful cry rang from her lips as she swayed back, her arms upflung. Natala saw her for an instant, a white figure of fear etched against a great, black, shapeless mass that towered over her. Then the white figure was whipped off its feet, the shadow receded with it, and in the circle of dim light Natala hung alone, half fainting with terror. From the black shadows came sounds, incomprehensible and blood-freezing. She heard Thalis's voice pleadingly frenzied, but no voice answered. There was no sound except the Stygian's panting voice, which suddenly rose to screams of agony, and then broke in hysterical laughter, mingled with sobs. This dwindled to a convulsive panting, and presently this too ceased, and a silence more terrible hovered over the secret corridor. Nauseated with horror, Natala twisted about and dared to look fearfully in the direction the black shape had carried Thalis. She saw nothing, but she sensed an unseen peril, more grisly than she could understand. She fought against a rising tide of hysteria. Her bruised wrists, her smarting body were forgotten in the teeth of this menace, which she dimly felt threatened not only her body, but her soul as well. She strained her eyes into the blackness beyond the rim of the dim light, tense with fear of what she might see. A whimpering gasp escaped her lips. The darkness was taking form. Something huge and bulky grew up out of the void. She saw a giant misshapen head emerging into the light. At least she took it for a head, though it was not the member of any sane or normal creature. She saw a great toad-like face, the features of which were as dim and unstable as those of a spectre seen in the mirror of a nightmare. Great pools of light that might have been eyes blinked at her, and she shook at the cosmic lust reflected there. She could tell nothing about the creature's body. Its outline seemed to waver and alter subtly, even as she looked at it, yet its substance was apparently solid enough. There was nothing misty or ghostly about it. As it came toward her, she could not tell whether it walked, wriggled, flew, or crept. Its method of locomotion was absolutely beyond her comprehension. When it had emerged from the shadows, she was still uncertain as to its nature. The light from the radium gem did not illumine it as it would have illumined an ordinary creature. Impossible as it seemed, the being seemed almost impervious to the light. Its details were still obscure and indistinct, even when it halted so near that it almost touched her shrinking flesh. Only the blinking toad-like face stood out with any distinctness. The thing was a blur in the sight, a black dot of shadow that normal radiance would neither dissipate nor illuminate. She decided she was mad because she could not tell whether the being looked up at her or towered above her. She was unable to say whether the dim, repulsive face blinked up at her from the shadows at her feet or looked down at her from an immense height. But if her sight convinced her that whatever its mutable qualities, it was yet composed of solid substance, her sense of feel further assured her of that fact. A dark, tentacle-like member slid about her body, and she screamed at the touch of it on her naked flesh. It was neither warm nor cold, rough nor smooth. It was like nothing that had ever touched her before, and its caress she knew, and at its caress she knew such fear and shame as she had never dreamed of. All the obscenity and salacious infamy spawned in the muck of the abysmal pits of life seemed to drown her in the seas of cosmic filth. And in that instant She knew that whatever form of life this thing represented, it was not a beast. She began to scream uncontrollably. The monster tugged at her as if to tear her from the ring by sheer brutality. Then something crashed above their heads, and a form hurtled down through the air to strike the stone floor. Yeah, we can assume that that's Conan. And he's here. And he's back with a vengeance. And we are going to we're going to stop, take a break. We'll pick up, probably not today, maybe tomorrow, with part 3. And oh, you know what? I think we're getting close to the end of this one. Now that the villainous beast is revealed, it must be slain by Conan, or something else, something similar. Who knows? It's been a while since I read these. I don't remember how any of them work or end or anything like that. So, thank you for joining me. Again, I am Austin, the Distracted DM. We have done a little bit of a narration, a little bit of a reading, an audio book, if you will, of Robert E. Howard's. So this collection is the Coming of Conan the Cimmerian, and it's pretty good. I like Conan the Barbarian stories. I've only read the Robert E. Howard ones, but I have read all of them. And again, I mentioned it in the previous stream, but it is a product of its time, and there is something to be said about separating the art from the artist, because thankfully this one does not have anything crazy objectionable like some Lovecraft stuff, but it is definitely a steel-thewed barbarian rescuing weak and timorous girlies, and yeah, lots of stuff like that. But yeah, so again, thank you for joining me, and we'll pick this up another time. I might do a little prep stream because I have a game of D&D tonight. I've got my Saturday Strahd game. May or may not stream that depending on how my throat's feeling. But yeah, all right. Thank you for joining me, Austin, the Distracted DM, and I'll see you in the dungeon.